Picture this, a country so massive it could swallow France, Spain, and Germany combined. A land where over 250 ethnic groups somehow coexist, where 500 different languages echo through markets and mosques, churches and corporate boardrooms. This African giant was not supposed to exist. It was literally named by a British journalist in 1897, and yet today, it is Africa's largest economy and most populous nation. How did this impossible country not only survive, but thrive? Nigeria's story is wilder than you think. Around 1500 BCE, when Europe was still figuring out bronze, the Nok people of central Nigeria were already smelting iron, creating terracotta sculptures so sophisticated that archaeologists initially refused to believe Africans made them. These were not crude figures. We are talking about stylized heads with elaborate hairstyles and expressive faces. Proportions that would make Renaissance artists jealous. Then, around 200 CE, the culture declined. The population dropped sharply, and pottery production fell dramatically, leaving archaeologists to debate environmental degradation, soil erosion, and climate change as the likely causes. But Nigeria was not done surprising the world. By the 11th century, the Hausa city-states in the north had built a trading network that stretched from Morocco to Egypt. These were not primitive settlements. Kano and Katsina boasted universities, libraries, and markets that attracted scholars from Baghdad and Cairo. Meanwhile, in the southwest, the Yoruba were constructing cities that would make medieval London look like a village. The city of Ife, which Yoruba tradition holds as the birthplace of humanity, produced bronze sculptures so lifelike. When German archaeologist Leo Frobenius saw them in 1910, he declared they must be proof of the lost Greek colony of Atlantis. While Europe was burning witches, the Kingdom of Benin in southern Nigeria had developed one of the world's most sophisticated political systems. Their Oba, or king, ruled through an elaborate bureaucracy that would make modern governments jealous. They had guilds for everything: bronze casters, ivory carvers, even professional warriors. When Portuguese explorers arrived in 1472, they found the city surrounded by walls 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China. The Portuguese captain wrote home, "The city is larger than Lisbon. The people are very friendly and know how to make bronze as well as any European." But let us talk about the horror in the hold. By the 1600s, that initial friendship had morphed into something monstrous. The Kingdom of Benin, along with other Nigerian states, became central players in the transatlantic slave trade. African kingdoms were not just passive victims, they were active participants. The Oba of Benin and Yoruba kings grew wealthy, selling their enemies, criminals, and increasingly anyone they could capture. Between 1500 and 1870, an estimated 3.5 million enslaved people were shipped from Nigerian ports. That is more than any other African region. Yet even as this horror unfolded on the coast, something remarkable was happening inland. In 1804, a Fulani Islamic scholar named Usman dan Fodio launched what might be history's most successful jihad. Within 25 years, his forces had conquered most of northern Nigeria, creating the Sokoto Caliphate, an Islamic state larger than any in Africa or the Middle East. This was not some backward theocracy. The Caliphate maintained libraries, promoted female education. Dan Fodio's daughter was a renowned poet and teacher, and created a unified legal system across dozens of ethnic groups. By 1850, it was one of the world's most populous empires with over 10 million subjects. In 1861, the British, now crusading against the slave trade they had once profited from, seized Lagos. Their excuse, the local king, was pro-slavery. Their real reason, control of palm oil trade, the petroleum of the 19th century. What followed was a masterclass in imperial manipulation. Rather than conquer outright, The British played ethnic groups against each other, signed protection treaties with chiefs who could not read English, and gradually absorbed the region piece by piece. The real architect of modern Nigeria was not a general or explorer, but a British journalist named Flora Shaw. In 1897, she suggested the name Nigeria, combining Niger, the river, and area in an article in the Times. When the British finally merged their northern and southern protectorates in 1914, they created a Frankenstein's monster of a nation. Muslim North and Christian South, over 250 ethnic groups, centralized kingdoms, and decentralized societies, all stitched together by colonial convenience. The British made their fatal mistake. Instead of trying to unify their creation, they deepened its divisions. They ruled the North through traditional Islamic leaders, preserving feudal structures. But in the South, they introduced Western education and Christianity, creating an educated elite who began questioning why exactly they needed British overlords. When independence finally came in 1960, Nigeria inherited a ticking time bomb. The British had spent 60 years telling different groups they had nothing in common, then handed them a unified state and said, "Good luck." It took exactly 6 years for the bomb to explode. In 1966, Igbo military officers staged a coup, killing northern political leaders. Northerners retaliated by slaughtering 30,000 Igbo civilians. The Igbo, concentrated in the oil-rich southeast, declared independence as the Republic of Biafra. What followed was Africa's first televised genocide. The Nigerian government blockaded Biafra, systematically starving the breakaway region. Those haunting images of skeletal children you have seen, that was Biafra. Over 1 million people, mostly children, died of starvation. The war ended in 1970 with Biafra's surrender, but the scars remain. Even today, mentioning Biafra in southeast Nigeria can get you arrested for treason. Just as Nigeria seemed doomed to permanent military dictatorship, there were 6 coups between 1966 and 1993. Oil money started flooding in. By the 1970s, Nigeria was swimming in petrodollars. The military rulers built a new capital, Abuja, from scratch in the geographic center of the country. Lagos transformed from a colonial backwater into one of the world's largest cities. But the more oil Nigeria pumped, the poorer its people became. It is called the resource curse, and Nigeria wrote the textbook. By 1999, despite earning over $300 billion in oil revenue, 70% of Nigerians lived on less than $1 a day. Then, something unexpected happened. The military actually kept its promise and allowed free elections. Since 1999, Nigeria has maintained democratic rule. Messy, corrupt, sometimes violent, but democratic nonetheless. And despite everything, modern Nigeria is not just surviving, it is exploding with creativity. Nollywood produces more films than Hollywood. Nigerian novelists like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie dominate global bestseller lists. Afrobeats artists like Burna Boy and Wizkid fill stadiums worldwide. Lagos has more tech startups than any African city outside Johannesburg. But let us be brutally honest about the challenges. Boko Haram terrorists control chunks of the northeast. Corruption is so endemic that police openly demand bribes at checkpoints. The oil-rich Niger Delta is an environmental hellscape. Ethnic and religious violence periodically explodes. In 2000, Sharia law implementation in northern states triggered riots that killed thousands. The country that should be Africa's superpower cannot even provide reliable electricity to its largest city. And yet, none of this stops Nigerians from being probably the most optimistic people on earth. Surveys consistently rank Nigeria among the world's happiest countries. How? Maybe it is because they have survived everything history could throw at them. The slave trade, colonialism, civil war, military dictatorships, and they are still here. Still creating, still building, still believing that tomorrow will be better than today. Perhaps that is Nigeria's real lesson. A nation is not just lines on a map drawn by some colonial administrator. It is not even shared language or religion or ethnicity. It is the daily choice millions of people make to live together despite their differences, to build something from the wreckage of history, to laugh in the face of chaos and keep pushing forward. Maybe the question is not how Nigeria survives. Maybe it is what the rest of us can learn from a people who refuse to let history, however brutal, define their future.